Eastern time, so why don't we jump in and get ourselves started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Niel Albero, part of the CAST Professional Learning Team. And we are joining you today just to share some stories about implementing UDL so that you might find and reflect on, where are you in your UDL journey in your district? And if this is your first webinar, if you're coming to us for your first time today, thank you for starting your journey with us today. Whether you're 5 years in, 10 years in, or maybe just a few months, we hope that you're going to be able to reflect, start to document your process, what you're learning about with UDL, and bring this work forward. So before we get started, we have some great panelists with us, which I'll introduce to you in a second. We want to make sure that you are all active in the chat, because as a community of learners here, we want to be able to share, to learn from each other, to be really active. You're going to have some options for participation today in the chat to share and reflect on your experiences. So we want you to contribute. Open that chat panel from the webinar's control and choose everyone. We want to make sure that you are your voice is being heard by everyone in the chat today. So please choose everyone, not just panelists and attendees, or not just panelists, but make sure that you've got everyone there from the drop-down menu. Add your questions to the Q&A. We're going to be monitoring that throughout. This really is an ongoing conversation where we'll provide some thinking, some reflecting, and some space for you all to share your voice. And we'll do our best to answer all your questions. If you are out there and you are ready to tweet, please use at @cast_UDL. Make sure that's all caps, and then hashtag CastPL. We'd love to hear you and see you active on Twitter. So whatever your way to express yourself is today, whether it's in the chat, whether it is some silent reflection, jotting down some notes, doing some drawings, or you do want to be active on Twitter, we hope that you'll find your space and voice today. All right, we have some resources for you that'll help you get started. We'll mention these resources throughout our entire experience today, and we hope you'll go back to them, reference them, and reach out to us at any time. So on the resource document, you'll see we have given us your email addresses, the Twitter link, our discussion topics, and then some resources that we'll be pointing to. That resource is bit.ly/CASTPL webinar. So please connect, and that link is in the chat for you as well. All right, our goals for this time together are Elisa and Jennifer and I are going to go through and share some patterns of UDL implementation. And we know UDL is going to look different everywhere, but there are some patterns that we can lean back on just to reflect and say, where are we? So we hope you'll take today to reflect on your work, to stop and think about, where have I just been? Where was I a few years ago? And where do I want to go? We hope that you'll take some time to document your process, writing down and leaving a recorded avenue of where we've been in our journey, a recorded record. So if if leadership moves along, if a lead teacher who's been learning about UDL and bringing that voice to the whole school moves along, that we have that written documentation of where we've been. So if today is the day to start your process, to start keeping your UDL scrapbook, get out your Cricut, get out your vinyl letters and your puffy paints, and start jotting down, where have you been? What is the process that you've used to bring UDL to your district in your space? And then we hope more than anything, we'll find your next steps. CAST Professional Learn is always thinking about how to best support the people that we work with, people around the country, by giving free resources, these webinars, and bringing this voice forward so you can always know, where have I been and where do I want to go with Universal Design for Learning. Our panel is wonderful today, all from the CAST Professional Learning Team. We have Elisa Torres-Barton, who will introduce herself in just a minute as we get going, an implementation specialist from California. I'm joining you from the PL East team, located in Central Massachusetts, and we have Jennifer Levine, our Chief Academic Officer. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you with just a little bit about CAST Professional Learning. Oh, I think we ought to unmute there, Jennifer.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Neil. I'm not quite as exciting as Elisa and Neil, so they just limited me to 2 slides so that you guys won't be stuck with me the whole time. But I'll just do a quick introduction of CAST and our professional learning team. CAST is moving in on 40 years of being up and running. We opened in 1984, back when the Apple IIe, I think, was just becoming ubiquitous. We are a nonprofit organization that does both research into the neuroscience of learning and professional learning, professional development on what we learned from that research team. And as many of you probably know, we are also the founders of Universal Design for Learning, which is used all over the world. You can see here just in the past year, so this is where we have been in this fiscal year so far, over 10,000 educators that we have touched across the United States and throughout the world. It's really fun to see that there's some folks from outside of the country on this call. So 36 states altogether, 25 countries, and we'd love to keep expanding. It's great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead, Niel.
I was just going to say, and as a reminder, we have thank you captioner Debbie for being here. So as we get into most of the content, please feel free to turn on those captions. You might be someone who requires them, so they're there for you. And if not, try it as a learning option. See how it works for you. Open it up, move it around your screen, change the size of the font, and use that to support your learning and note-taking today.
Yeah, they might want to mute us too, Niel. They might want to mute us and just read, right? It's all good. All right, new friends. Well, my name is Elisa Torres-Barton, and like I shared earlier, for those of you that jumped on a little bit earlier, I am coming to you from Central California. But quick story, I am born and raised in New York City. I am a daughter of immigrants from the Dominican Republic. I am that example, as I have a feeling most in this room. We're here despite the system, right? Because I check a lot of boxes, right? English learner, different accommodations necessary, all of these pieces. But I am an educator and a lifelong learner at heart. And this piece of UDL, my friends, has been life-changing. I'm a former high school, secondary math teacher, a site leader, district leader. And when we talk to you about UDL, it comes from such a personal space that those hiccups you might hit as you're thinking about through the systems lens, which we're going to tap into today a little bit, just know when in doubt, go back to the learner-centered moment. And so it might be, and we're going to ground you in that in a couple of slides here in a second. It might be that you're coming to us today thinking about, I want to use Universal Design for Learning to create a collaborative space across the district, a collaboration. Maybe you're a district leader and you're thinking, man, we have all these different initiatives. What is the through line? Might Universal Design for Learning be the through line? You're in the right space. It might be that your system and or yourself personally as an educator are thinking about, how do I close the achievement gap? I share often with my colleagues that I've always felt like an equity warrior. And until UDL, I didn't have a pragmatic way to go beyond the yes, church, amen moment, right? The practical, but okay, what does it really look like though? Like tomorrow on Monday, what does it really look like? UDL is definitely a tool for that. Might it be that you yourself and or your system is engaged in supporting students with overlapping educational needs? Might it be that your system is considering how to create a more inclusive system? So we'd love to pause right now. Sorry, Siri got something to say about that on my Apple Watch. But anyway, when I want to know the world weather, she doesn't answer, but right now she's in my business. But anyway, so friends, in the chat, if you'd be so kind, what is bringing you to this space today? How is it the one way I think about it is UDL is the answer to what? What does your gut tell you, and or your schedule, your role tell you UDL might be a support for what in your system? Go ahead and drop it in the chat if you'd be so kind.
And those of you watching the recording at home, thank you. Maybe you're with a PLC, maybe you're with your leadership team. A great time to stop and have this conversation. Why are we using UDL, or why are we considering UDL? What are we hoping for?
Yeah. Oof, through line, Niel, inclusive, right? Inclusive, support. The word implementation, what does this look like lived? For sure, for sure. How do we include all learners? Inclusion, practical guide for making general ed, yes. Accessing the core instruction, that first tier, right? That first grade instruction, wonderful. Yes. Preach, Kate, preach, right? Many students with special needs, English learners, traumatic backgrounds, right? And we're not even talking pandemic. We're talking about regular, I'm a 13-year-old. What does my life look like? What is the context? To empower teachers, wonderful. Helping teachers support our learners. Fantastic. Lots of good whys, Niel, when we hit that why spot. Lots of wonderful, compelling whys. Wonderful. All right, so I have a feeling that we have a lot of 9s and 10s here, but this is what I mean. Where are you in your UDL awareness? We don't want to make assumptions. We've hypothesized in our design today who would be in our Zoom room and or watching this later. But are you a maybe a 1? This is my first time learning about universal design for learning. Somebody sent me the link. Somebody said, hey, I just took a course in this. You might be interested. You might be a 1. Or are you a 5? We have some teachers or teams implementing, we've dabbled in this. Or are you a 10? And of course, anywhere in between. We are full school district and incorporate UDL into systems. We're at that systems level where things are working no longer in silos. Wonderful, thank you. 5s, 3s, 7s, 3 to 4s, 7, yeah. Yeah. So variability is the norm. I have a feeling if I ask you more deeper question, you might say, it depends. We're a 7 here, it might be a 2 there, right? Wonderful, thank you.
And Elisa, I'll just call us to that poster that's on the right. So there is an image on the right side of the screen with American Sign Language showing the numbers 1 through 10. And so interesting, I learned from the putting this slide together is that we show 1 through 5 with the back of our hand showing, and we show 6 through 10 with the front of our palm showing. So I learned something new today.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I try to teach my 5-year-old. We use sign language sometimes to help her when she's too upset to use words. So I'm going to definitely take this for sure. All right, friends. So as I shared earlier that, we are coming to you, Niel, Jennifer, and I are coming to you probably as learners first, and then of course, as advocates and educators. Let's get centered around learner voice, around meet Kendall. She's a 4th grader. She talks about the attention challenges she faces when learning. And so just listen in and cue in on all those pieces that might resonate with you as a practitioner, as a learner, and or a Kendall that you're living with and raising at home, and or you're supporting at a site.
My name is Kendall. I'm in the 4th grade, and paying attention is a big struggle for me. It feels like one side of my body is fighting with the other side. When you're trying to learn about verbs or division, my hands start shaking. You can feel your body wanting to get up. I push my chair back and then just start going everywhere. Some friends are like, you're weird, Kendall, or you're really crazy. And so and they're just joking around, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes I kick the bottom of my friend's chair and I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. And I try to control it.
Thank you. So you may have and or you might be a Kendall. And so we have a visual of what that might look like, right? What is it that we're talking about when we say we want to include with all the whys you shared in the chat? It might be in service of a Kendall. It might be like the data in front of you that says that 42% of our students feel persistently sad or hopeless. So students are tired and unhappy. It might be that we're all are tired. 73% of teachers feel frequent job-related stress. 59% report burnout. Chronic absenteeism has doubled. Large numbers of failing grades, 10 to 30%, or 9th graders that are not on track to graduate, or increasing mental health concerns, whereas 29% of students report poor mental health. If you're in this room, you know the data. You know the qualitative piece, where you hear the Kendalls in your campus. You know the quantitative piece, this data from the CDC report. And so how is UDL might be an answer to support this? So just also know, friends, we wanted to give you a little bit of FYI, UDL is everywhere, in the sense that UDL is part of the ESSA, right, of the 2015. UDL is written into the National Education Technology Plan of 2016. UDL is in the EdTech Developers Guide. UDL is in Higher Education Opportunity Act of 2008. It's in the UDL National Education Technology Plan of 2010. And it lives in these buckets of assessment, comprehensive literacy plans, state use of fundings, and accessible materials and technology. So we share this with you because although it is compelling because of our Kendalls and because of our data, also know that there is a part of that it's written in our frameworks. For example, in California, every single one of our content area frameworks calls out UDL to be a tool to support this. And so feel free to dive in and to center yourself around any of these pieces that pull you in. But let's get grounded a little bit. And then again, I know I saw a lot of variability as to 1 through 10 where you are, but just in case, A reminder that UDL is an educational framework based on research in the learning sciences that guides the development of flexible and accessible methods, materials, and environment that embrace learner variability, minimize barriers, and develop expert learning for all. You'll see this in, and I would say 99% of our CAST presentations, because it's critical to have that operational definition as to what is the intent, what is the thinking behind the UDL. And then the practical side, friends, on this next slide is what this looks like is as designers of instruction, we look at these 4 areas, right? We look at materials, how the content is being represented. We look at the methods, how the content is being delivered. We look at the assessment, how is the learning being demonstrated? And we look at the environment, right? How is the climate culture supportive of the learning environment? And what I share with my teams often is, friends, either we're doing UDL or not, either you're on board or not, our educators are making decisions around these 4 buckets no matter what. Every single day, just teachers, coaches, leaders are making decisions around materials. They're making decisions around methods. They're making decisions around assessment and environment. So wouldn't it be fantastic to look at it through the lens of universal design for learning so that we can remove some of those inherent barriers? In essence, the next graphic will share another way to explain this idea. On the left-hand side, you'll see 3 spectators watching the soccer game, and all 3 spectators are standing on one box. All 3 of them are standing on one box. We talk about that in the context of equality. And then we've evolved as educators and understand that different learners might need different things. And so we say, okay, so maybe this person doesn't need one box to see over the fence. It could be this person doesn't even need a box, and then the second spectator needs 1, and then the third needs 2. But with UDL, we say, let's look at those areas. Let's look at how the design around that fence, right? That goal of being able to watch the soccer game safely still stays in place. But might it be that if we redesign the fence, then the barrier of the fence itself will no longer be a problem? And the other piece we like to highlight at CAST is that we're not saying that those supports, those boxes are no longer there, but instead the user and or the learner gets to decide, you know what, I want 1 or 2 or 3, right? We pivot that choice point, and that agency pivots to the learner. So Niel's going to walk us through on this next part of like, this is wonderful, Jennifer, Elisa, and Niel, this is fantastic, we're on board, but what is that ecosystem we're going to pull out? What is that ecosystem that would support this type of work of looking at our designs and our methods, materials, assessment, and environment through the lens of universal design for learning?
Elisa, you've given me so much there to think about, from just hearing Kendall's story, to think about how UDL shows up in legislation, to thinking about the definition and why do I come to this framework, and then this slide about equity and thinking about removing systemic barriers to learning. So I'll ask, you've given me so much to think about. Let's pause and see what the audience is thinking about. What's the one thing that resonated from you? Was it the data around how students and teachers are feeling right now? Is it the legislation? Is it thinking about the curriculum and environment that we create within classrooms and within schools? What's resonating for you so far? Go ahead and put it into that chat. Take a minute to stop and reflect. Call to mind something that just gave you a thought. I'll put that definition back up there for us all too. Maybe there you'll find one word or phrase from the definition that really resonates for you. Yeah, yep, great.
Where do we start, right? Where do I start? How do we take a bite out of this elephant, right? Yeah.
What I think this reinforces as things coming through the chat, so much great coming through the chat. The physical, thinking about the environment exists in all of our content frameworks, agency, learner agency, and pivoting to that. The data about how our students are feeling and how teachers are feeling right now at this moment. And how do we give that starting point? And that's the wonderful thing about universal design for learning as a framework, as you can see on the, is posted on the definition on the screen right now. As a framework, we can find those entry points. It's going to be different in every district based upon the policies and procedures, the curriculum that we have in place, the ways that we collaborate. That's the work that we do as the professional learning team. We connect with you and help you to find your first steps, to say, where is that starting point? It's going to be different for everyone. We'll start to share those, some of those starting points and ideas as we go through the rest of our work together. And the graphic sticks in our mind every time. Awesome. All right, I'm going to do a quick movement of the slides, so bear with me as we spring forward. But as Elisa said, we want to build inclusive ecosystems of school within schools, not just individual inclusive classrooms, but an inclusive ecosystem. And so if you haven't seen this work yet, UDL has published and it has shared on learning design, and we have a link to that in our digital handout. The UDL School Implementation Certification Criteria. I'll go slow on that, SICC, where you can think about not only UDL often enters from the classroom level, and we want everyone in a district, everyone in the state to understand UDL in practice within that classroom level, but it goes beyond that. That's what we hope to support. But what are the areas? We focus on teaching and learning often because we want, and up on the screen just came a logo of two people thinking next to each other, and it says teaching and learning. That's just one domain when we think about the UDL School Implementation Certification Criteria. And generally, all the work that we do in schools and districts is surrounded around that one area, around teaching and learning, about how can we impact our students? But we have to look with UDL into some other areas. So we think about school culture and environment. How are we building a school culture and environment that respects the variability of all of its constituents, not only the students, but us as educators, about families, about administrators, and about the community at large? So how do we use UDL? The UDL guidelines, what does that look like in practice when we're thinking about school culture and environment? And we have to expand beyond the classroom to say, if we can't just retrofit one classroom at a time, we have to build an ecosystem that's equitable for all. And we start with school culture and environment, the feeling that we get when we walk into the space, that we all belong and this place is designed for us. And then we go to leadership and management, and we think about what are our roles as leaders and managers within the district to be able to put together systems and processes that help to create that inclusive environment. And it might start with something as, are the materials that we're bringing into the district accessible to all learners? That's one of the first questions we ask when we think about that leadership and management domain. Imagine as an educator in a classroom, if all the materials that came into the environment were accessible from the beginning and had UDL options within it. If we establish systems that procure those materials, the classroom teacher's job becomes much more seamless. And finally, professional learning. How are we modeling universal design for learning in our own professional learning, being experts ourselves about our school, about our processes, and about our own practice? We know that in universal design for learning, we want to build that expert learning within our students, but let's build expert learning systems who think about school culture and environment, teaching and learning, leadership and management, and the professional learning that we do as an all-encompassing ecosystem to make each of us and collectively better and expert learners. All right, so let's start some storytelling. We're going to go through some implementation journey. And again, whether this is day one, I know I saw a few ones in the chat about just learning about UDL. This is your time to vision ahead. Again, if you're a team that's watching on recording, this is a time that you can pause and have a discussion about where do we want this journey to go. If you're well into your journey, then stop and say, where have we not documented this enough? Where have we not shared stories that will impact the rest of the work? Sometimes we get so far down the road in the work that we forgot where we've been, and we forgot to use those assets that we created along the way. So we're going to talk through this implementation journey. We're going to get you sharing into the chat about the things that have worked for you and the questions you have, and we'll spend this rest of this time in conversation over implementation. On the right of the screen, there are 5 concentric circles that label these different phases that we go through. So exploring, finding your why; preparing, we call popping the popcorn, that's getting things ready, building that excitement; integrate, we know UDL is a team sport. How we collaborate with UDL is so essential. We scale, we begin to see UDL everywhere, and then we build systems so that UDL doesn't just lie in the people within the district, it lies in the collaborations and in the protocols and the systems that we use to meet all learners' needs. All right, so let's start with explore, finding your why. Again, these are patterns around how we've seen UDL happen in districts. So what are the whys that you brought UDL in through in your district? Leaders are learning about UDL and they decide whether UDL implementation will address the needs of the community. We hope with that clear vision of why, when you bring that in, that's your guiding light. That's where you say, this is the goal that we want to achieve with UDL, and we're going to make all of our strategic decisions based upon that why. So again, put those whys in. Why did you bring UDL, or why are you thinking about bringing UDL into your system? Pausing just a second, seeing what whys come through and referring back up to the whys we put in earlier.
And Neil, I would also add to this, colleagues, if you're curious, on the digital handout, there's tools that are part of the SICC tool. Like, for example, if you want to start with an assessment, self-assessment, let me use the language we use in the digital tool. There's different entry points to this piece, so feel free to engage in that. I see lots of cursors on it already. The self-assessment tool, the implementation worksheet, there's lots of ways to engage in this, just in case these 5 ways, these concentric circle approach may not be where you're curious about right now.
Yeah. So a lot of great things coming through. And we call this the door. What's the door that brings UDL in? And with whatever door that you open to bring in UDL, we have to understand, how is it perceived? So I see some mention of special education. So it's important when implementing, if it's coming in through a special education lens, that we realize it's for everyone. UDL is designed for all learners. If it's coming in through best tier 1 instruction, we want to maximize that. We have great things going on in our district, and UDL will help us to identify what are the things we're doing, help us to use common language around what we're doing, and find our opportunities to grow. Creating inclusive classrooms with all students accessing high quality grade level materials. And Katie, I love that. I love that why. And how well do we articulate that vision? What does the classroom look like when we do this? If we articulate that vision and we know how it functions, and that's the work of our work together, as we bring UDL professional learning through CAST into a district, we create that vision. What is this classroom going to look like when all learners are working together? When we create the vision, yes, we can design to get there. Yes, and Megan saying it's important for everyone to learn to adapt, not just special education teachers, right? So where do we want general education teachers pushing on the curriculum to embed these tools, these supports for all learners?
Neil, I'll jump in, and one of the other pieces I share with our team is, imagine if we were going to use, let's say you're walking down the street and you're going to use a curb cut. In our system, only if my family or myself has advocated and I get a 504 and IEP, do I get access to that curb cut. Imagine in our day-to-day life, if accessibility was the same way we structured in schools. Now, I'm going way back, that 30,000 view of like, there's lots of barriers, but just thinking about that, in what ways are sometimes we are creating barriers within the systems to a learner to be able to access, and a learner, I'm talking about any size, right? Adult or littles, to be able to access that piece that would remove a barrier, right? So that why is going to be pivotal in designing what we go after in the next couple of stages.
Awesome. We're seeing so much around inclusionary practices, but struggling with that. And that's where the word access comes in with universal design for learning. And maybe we just adopt that word this year and say, where are we finding the barriers to access for every learner? If we start to identify those barriers, share practices around how we are addressing the barrier of access, that's when we can take those next steps into providing all of those learners the agency to be who they are as learners in that space. Awesome. So many great things coming through. Keep that coming. We need to write these whys down. We need to post them on our walls. We need to see them in our hallways. They should be on the top of every professional learning document that we use, and at the forefront of everything that we communicate in our district about why are we bringing UDL and all the other practices that we're bringing into the district. Yeah, awesome. And Susan just elevates where are we finding barriers to access for learners. An environment that enables all learners to belong, right? When we communicate that learning happens in flexible ways and we design that way, learners begin to see where they fit in, how they learn, and how they can best achieve their own personal goals. Awesome.
And the variability, right, Neil? The variability exists even if I just don't design for it, right? The learner variability is the needs are there, the barriers are there. And so again, choir, I know we're talking to the choir, but UDL definitely gives us a practical way to approach these pieces. Okay.
So some of you are very clear on your why. And again, if this is day one of your why, write it down and start to create that vision. If you're down the road with your why, but you haven't checked in with it, that if you asked every person around the school, they would go, I don't know why we're doing UDL. Let's tap into that and make sure we're recommitting to that. When that's our guidepost, we can start to build that together and start to build the vision and have teachers build the vision of what that looks like when we're all interacting together. All right, the next one we call popping the popcorn. This is the prepare phase. So on the right side of the screen, we have our second of concentric circles joining. We've explored, we're thinking about the why, and we know that UDL is something that can help. We think it's a framework that if we put it into practice, our vision, our why can become a reality. So in this time, small teams begin learning about UDL, whether it's just in a school, whether it's district-wide, whether it's statewide, we're learning about UDL. And the most important thing is we're experimenting it with UDL in our own practice. That means if you're an administrator, you are trying UDL and you are modeling UDL in a staff meeting. If we are teachers in the classroom, we're building lessons, changing one thing at a time, just one small change with UDL in mind to make an impact for learners. This team of early adopters becomes the expert in your setting. And I know from doing this work in the field, there's not a video that I can show you that's going to mean more than the person next to you saying, when I made this one change with our curriculum, our students, our materials, this is what happened with the kid where you know the background, you know the story. So as CAS Professional Learning, we try to help you tell that story. When we come in and we start working with teams, we ask you to create slide decks that show an image and tell this story. What change did you make? What barrier were you anticipating and designing for? What was the impact for students? If you have not in your UDL implementation been good about recording these stories, today is the time to start. Any teachers that are applying, let's create those slide decks that we can share across the school or across the district that have these stories in them. Let's start to use the UDL guidelines to create a Google document that we share or a shared document where we can put in our experiences and our thoughts on a certain guideline or checkpoint. And maybe pick one place to start. How are we recruiting interest? You'll notice in the image of the UDL guidelines, that's the first box that we see because we know if we start by recruiting interest, we open the door to learning. We give access to that emotional space where learning can happen. So have you been good about recording your stories? Have you been good about having people share out the things that are happening at staff meetings with that new team that's starting things, sharing those one small changes that they made and bringing people and opening that door, lowering the affective filter to UDL being a new thing to, wow, look at these stories of change. I want that for my kids. So I'm going to ask you, please put in the chat. Share some of your stories. What were the early things that you started doing that made you know that UDL was something worth trying out? Yeah, Amy, thank you. Confidentiality with stories. We only share them within the district. So whatever you are creating, it's not for us, for CAST, and it shouldn't be for anyone else. It just should be for use within the school and district. So what are those things that you've been trying? What are those things, the early things that you got going in your classroom that said, wow, these small changes add up to big things? Yeah, choice and voice. Megan, I'm gonna yes and choice and voice. I love choice and voice as a thought, and access and agency really helped me to push choice and voice to new levels, to say access. Wow, sometimes I have to provide choices so students can access the materials. And agency can push me to say, how do you want to use that voice? What does that voice look like in your own way and in your own space? Opportunities for a choice of flexible seating. Yes, sometimes we don't even start with the lesson. We start with the environment. How can we create universally flexible environments within our community so that when students walk to different classrooms or go to different classrooms or are in wheelchairs to different classrooms, they don't feel like they're in a different country every classroom they go to that has different rules and different expectations. Well, there's actually some commonality that, however I need to self-regulate or be in this space, I have the flexibility to do that here.
Niel, I'll share that our work in California, for example, for this particular grant that I work with, this early adopter piece, friends, has been crucial. And so some districts have selected to jump on of like, Elisa, I'm not bringing in teachers yet. I need to be a learner. I'm the superintendent. I'm the district leader. I need to be able to ask you some questions and not worry about if the answer is right or wrong. I need to be able to engage with you and provide that, yeah, but moment, right? Like, yeah, this is great, but what about this? This preparation stage is crucial, in which, in other words, we can be really intentional about who's in the room. And so they can also be learners. Often in districts and in systems, we're big on initiatives, lots of, starting of an initiative. And sometimes the people leading the work didn't have the space to be learners. I would say has been a huge shift on my districts that I have been in that learner space, only thinking about, like Niel, what you suggested, what can I do on this PL I'm doing Monday? Or, hey, I'm having this coaching conversation with a paraprofessional. This is something I'm trying, and not worrying about that scaling part. And now, friends, I know it is challenging. Our boards expect a lot, our communities expect a lot, and even better, our kids deserve more sooner. But to that end, it is critical that we afford the opportunity for our adults to engage in this and have those yeah ands, because in the end, it will pay off, right? We know we don't want compliance, is I guess what I would say, right? We want people that experience it and can facilitate those yes and I would say in this preparation phase is definitely where we've gotten bang for our buck when it comes in engaging around this, because they can say they're not worried about the teacher and from their site being in the same room. It's just principal to principal. What are you going to be doing about planning time? The union says this. What are some options around that, right? They can have some real real life, right? Keeping it real conversations about some of the barriers as we think about the next steps of implementation.
So give your teachers the space, especially administrators, to just say, I want you to be a learner. That's all I want you to do right now.
Yes.
Is just be a learner. Don't think
Yes.
about UDL to teach it to somebody else. Just
Yeah.
thinking as you learn in this preparation phase, just learn to be a learner. And let's remember because those are the times that you'll draw back on. Those are the experiences that will resonate with your colleagues. So build this toolbox from those early people who are starting with UDL. Build these visuals, these wonderful stories around implementation, so that we can take those stories, we can say it happened in the classroom next door. This is what it looked like. But most importantly, always model the thinking. What was the barrier that I saw? What did I do to address that barrier, the small change that I made, and what was that impact on learners? Because really UDL is not about the end product, right? It's about the ongoing process of thinking about those barriers, being really goal-directed, and providing meaningful options to whoever our learners are, whether adult learners or our students.
So this is not the stage to say, often my leaders will say, Elisa, is there a walkthrough tool for UDL? And the preparation stage, we're not talking about a walkthrough tool, right? Although I get it, I get our need to systematize feedback. But at this stage, I would just say, let's shy away from that, because exactly what you said, Niel, this is a process. We're not replicating instruction. We're learning about variability so that we can support learner variability, right? It's a very different way of learning about learning.
This next phase reminds us that UDL is a team sport, right? We're not trying to create inclusive schools by creating individual inclusive classrooms. And a lot of times that early learning, that's what it feels like. Each person separately going back, they're applying UDL. Yes, they might bring back their learning and do some sharing, but until we realize it's about creating this consistency, creating this language and collaboration across the school so that our community is a living community of expert learning, we have to move to this next phase. And we call this integrate. The three concentric circles on the right move from explore to prepare to integrate. And it reminds us UDL is a team sport. So this is where we're integrating UDL into instructional practice. We have collaborative planning time. So that's when teachers can come together and create model lessons. Not that every teacher has to use or create every lesson the same, but we get that opportunity to come together to design intentionally with UDL. So we can say, wow, this is what the best UDL lesson looks like in our classrooms with our resources for our students. We observe each other. We see classroom and practice. We get times to go in and look for the UDL guidelines and checkpoints in action within our own classrooms and schools. We use at CAST, we use a process called instructional rounds where the team guides the thinking and learning. And in a process of learning about what we're doing and then setting our next goal and thinking about where do we want to go next with UDL. But it has to be a team sport. We have to build that consistency and language across classrooms. We open those doors so that the sharing is intentional by design and it has a language and framework backed by UDL. And then we're designing that professional development. So that's one answer I saw in the chat. To another problem is sometimes we just start by designing our professional learning with UDL in mind so that teachers can experience this feel. So remember, maybe our stuck moments are around not moving to this phase, around teachers working on UDL kind of in isolation or just in small groups and not getting to the point where we're seeing each other, we're collaborating across the school, and we're talking about UDL as a framework. UDL as a team sport might be the phase you want to think about. So reflect in the chat. Is there something that you've done that has helped bring UDL to the whole school conversation? Maybe it is the observation, maybe it's instructional rounds or another process or procedure you use, maybe in your PLCs. How are you making UDL a team sport in your environment? Seeing not as much action in the chat, Elisa, I'm wondering if this is a stumbling point or a reflection area for some. Great. We see Stephen says, I took the book, What Works with UDL from Corwin and explicitly connected the content area strategies. Awesome. So maybe it is a book study. Maybe it is these workshops where we work collectively. Awesome. And we come out with some collective products or models for ourselves. Yeah, thinking about experiencing UDL in PD, not starting at implementation, but starting at us as learners and creating the system where they can feel and value their own agency as learners. UDL 365, book 2, bite-sized chunks, and we'll have a code for you that'll be able to support CAST professional learning as well at the end. So yes, such a great learning library. Yeah, group, Kristen, great. Using lesson planning, a template in group planning.
I love they dropped the 20% off discount. Yes, please. Thank you, Jennifer.
Awesome. So the more that we see this as a collaborative event, and then we think about why is that important? Because then our learners are going to have that collaborative experience. Our learners are going to go into classrooms where we all value instruction, where in one classroom, they get access to a digital text where they can change the font size, where they can listen to the text. Well, when they go to the classroom next door, that's still going to be offered, right? We have to create learning environments that are predictable for students. And that's why this phase is so important. So we go beyond just teachers kind of in a marathon. Everybody's running next to each other, but we're not really working as a team in that analogy. But in analogy of a team sport, we're all working on the same goals. We're bringing the same supports and tools into the classroom. So as learners go from place to place, they can center on the hard learning that we're asking them to do to reach these really challenging learning goals. They're not wondering if there's going to be a graphic organizer or a support or flexible seating, because that's built in. We've already designed that and said we value that in this learning community. And we've taught students how to use those things so they can be really fluent learners. Yeah, modeling UDL in the design of the day, Michaela, good. And stop at the end of that training and say, what did you notice? Why did we do this? Maybe everything's not going to work out perfect. I noticed that in professional learning, but we can tell our intention. I provided this in this way for you so that you had a multiple option to perceive the content or information. Awesome. Use that language. All right, let's keep going. We're going to take about 5 more minutes to go through our last 2 phases, and then we'll stop for questions or thoughts and see where everyone's feeling and what we can do next to support your needs. So then we get into the scaling phase. So this is where we begin, right? We bring that collaborative team on. We're starting to observe each other, and then we start to see UDL everywhere. And in this scale phase, scale doesn't always have to be about reaching the most people, but bringing UDL beyond just teaching and learning, bringing it to our other areas. So we can think about, how do we touch every teacher, or how do we touch every part of a school day or every part of the school ecosystem, and make sure that we're honoring the variability of every learner that the system touches. So those concentric circles on the right, we are now at our 4th concentric circle, which has scale phase. So the district and school-wide systems are reviewed and aligned with UDL. This is where we think about professional learning with embedded universal design for learning, our leadership and management to think about how our leaders are supporting the community, the school culture that we create that honors not only our learners, but our teachers and staff. And then the teaching and learning, so that we start to see all of these other facets of the school day and of the school ecosystem there to support teaching and learning. We plan for training and mentoring for staff and educators. So solidify those first 3 places: our why, our small teams that are trying, getting them to collaborate, and that's what, at that readiness to really bring UDL whole school. And you might start with an introduction to UDL for a whole staff, and then we have this team that's working and bringing those stories back. So that scale phase, we begin to see UDL everywhere. You might see some changes start to happen in the cafeteria. That was one of my favorite places to apply UDL when we thought about the goals of the cafeteria, and we said, oh, actually, the goals are efficiency, but also positive social interactions. And that's a goal we never designed for in the cafeteria. That made us make a lot of changes. Maybe it's the recess procedures, maybe it's communication with parents, but you start to see UDL as a place that can touch every part of the system. So where else, put into the chat, where else are you thinking about UDL? What other places in your system are you saying, UDL, we need that there, and we can rethink about the way that we do things? Elisa, do you have any other stories of the ways people are thinking beyond the classroom?
Yeah, that piece you mentioned, Niel, about the environment. There was one PLC, professional learning community, that I was working with. It was a middle school math team. And so although, yes, they want to tackle lessons, they were talking about, as they were preparing for next semester for the, it was in the fall, about the environment. So we did a predictable options inventory, right? What are the things that we can predict in the context of math that all the math teachers could provide. So everything as classic as the graph paper, patty paper, geometry supports, to what are those tech supports that could help our learners model and right. So they were able to have those conversations. And then my favorite part, Neil, was the fact that they were able to advocate, hey, the entire 7th and 8th grade team technology person would love to have this extension dropped into all our Chromebooks, right? Just thinking about that environment piece, right? What is present at all times for all learners, regardless of what lesson we're learning about, right?
Yeah, and so much great coming through the chat. Thinking about the IEP process, right? What's access and agency for our families in the IEP process look like, right? Awesome. Parent and caregiver teacher conferences, wonderful. Awesome. So many great ways we're thinking beyond, even sports coaching. Thanks, Janice. Yeah, absolutely. How do we bring this this idea into our sports coaching? Awesome. And designing the PD, right? Getting our teachers to feel it. So we begin to see UDL everywhere. Our final phase, the optimize phase, is that's when we're building the systems. When we don't want UDL just to live in the people that are in the district, but in the systems that we use. So we see proactive planning for the onboarding of new staff. We know that staff turnover in districts is often a problem to UDL taking off. So is it part of the introduction planning that we do with teachers? Maybe they come in 2 days before the school year starts and they have their opening trainings in the staff in the school. Do we have UDL as part of those? Collaboration starts to happen across schools within the district so that there's not just one school working on this inclusive ecosystem, but all schools bring that. We bring a data-driven decision-making process to implementation of UDL, where we're identifying barriers throughout those 4 domains, in the school culture, in teaching and learning, in professional development, in leadership and management. And we think about how we can use UDL in each of those areas and what data we want to impact. One of the things that we hope to do as CAST Professional Learning is create within 3 years, as we work with a district, this self-sustaining in their own application. That as we go through this process together, as we guide and learn about a district, learn about the strengths and the ways that we collaborate, the systems that are built in, we can leave behind and anytime we work with a district, and you all look like you're working with districts as well, that we leave that self-sustaining ability to the district so that they can continue to build and grow. UDL shouldn't be just for the moment, it should be for any moment that comes along. That was one of our pride, and I know the pride that I work with. So many emails when we went fully remote as COVID hit, that teachers emailed me and said, I'm ready to deal with this. I know where to look, I know what to pay attention to, and I know how to begin. I don't know every tool yet, but I know how to start to change my instruction so that every student maintains that access and agency in learning. So no matter what comes down the line, no matter what new initiative or framework or demand comes into the district, we are ready to design it for every learner. So that's where we think about how do we build those systems so that in the protocols that we use and the ways that we collaborate, the ways that we bring new materials into the district, it has UDL in mind from the forefront. Elisa, where are you seeing schools really work on building these systems?
Yeah, it's almost, I dropped an IEP webinar series that we did here in CAST earlier this fall. We're looking through the things that exist already. So IEPs, 504s, SSTs, structures for 9th grades, right? Some of our high schools have a focus team of adult supporting learners transitioning from middle school to high school. And so we're looking at through the lens of UDL, what might it look like? What are some barriers that we can definitely anticipate that we wrestle with every single fall, right? Every single October, we joke October and March are prickly for discipline, right? What is it about that? So those are some of the ways that our teams are looking at their systems looking through the lens of UDL for sure.
Awesome. So we'll pause there for a bit. What's your questions? What are you wondering? What are your shout outs? Or maybe you found your next goal. Awesome. Yeah. Go ahead, Michael and Laura. Let's see some questions. Yeah, and I'm seeing a question. Thank you, Mindy. Any advice on how to include parents in a plan for their child when they don't speak English? And that's where our translation services are obviously so important, making sure that we have those in line, and those are part of building systems, right? What translation services are we going to use when families don't speak English? And it starts with their goals. If we can get them to communicate their goals for their child, their learner, then we can be able to bring their goals to light. Start by finding out what they value and what they celebrate, so that we can bring, as we invite them into the school, or maybe we use virtual sessions to be able to meet with them, or maybe just written correspondences. We can highlight their students' work, their achievements, their successes in those areas that those families value, to invite them into that community. What is one?
Environment.
Yeah.
Environment, Stacy. So to Laura also, I know more people in the room are asking the question about what do we think about with the predictable options inventory. So friends, think of the 3 principles, and maybe we do a webinar on this, Neil. I'm not sure if there's demand for it, but that idea of looking at the shell. So around engagement, what are the options we currently provide around engagement to support all learners, just regardless of who they are, and also the lesson? What do we do for multiple means of representation? What's always in place, and what's always in place for action and expression? And so what we do is we walk you through some of the geeky definitional stuff as to what does the brain say, why this is so essential. Then we reflect on what do you already have in place in your system, in your classroom, in your grade level, and then what else might we? What is that +1? What else might we tweak, add? Hey, only this grade level has this extension for Chromebooks. Well, what if we did it K-12? What, those little things is a part of the byproduct of going through something like that, through that lens of what can we predict automatically every August? What are the barriers? Every January, what are the barriers? And so on and so forth.
And Stacy, the one piece of advice that you tell a new teacher preparing to set up a new classroom is access. Where, as I create this classroom space, how am I giving all learners access to the learning? So start with that. Start with that question.
And even maybe thinking, how new teachers, I remember being super nervous of like, well, I've heard that, I was secondary, so the period after lunch is going to be prickly because there's, they were out there playing and so what are those barriers to learning? What might I have to do to support variability after lunch? What might I need to consider at the beginning of the morning? What might I have to consider on a Monday versus a Friday, right? Those are questions our new teachers are wrestling with anyway, but in the context of thinking about variability, options, and barriers, it gives them a more empowering space. And then of course the guidelines prompt us on some ideas of how we might support. All right, 3 minutes, Neil. I think we're
I was just going to say, hopefully hopefully we reached our goals today by outlining how implementation happens within a district, and that evolution, or those phases that we go through. And every phase doesn't have a certain amount of time. Sometimes you might live in that prepare phase where you're having just individual teachers learn. That might be a whole year, and that's okay. Maybe you get into that integrate phase where we just say, we're going to have teachers this year work on collaborating on lessons and visiting each other's classrooms. And that might happen for an entire year. We're in this for the long haul, right? Building inclusive systems is not going to happen overnight. So find your next steps. Hopefully you reflected today and said, oh, maybe if we're stuck, this is a place we can go to get unstuck. If we are down the road in our implementation, we might want to say, wow, we kind of missed this piece. We're not really thinking about the consistency across classrooms, or the processes that we use to bring in curriculum. So hopefully you found your space today, or you at least know where to look to find the answers to that. As CAS Professional Learning, we always aim to provide a customized experience. So if there is something that we can do to help meet your needs, please reach out. Any one of the emails that are in our digital document, you can reach out to us and just ask, what are our next steps in learning? How can CAS support us? We do everything from introduction to UDL, webinars or in-person meetings, lesson planning workshops. We go beyond the basics to really get teachers to unpack and understand the UDL guidelines. We can lead implementation workshops for your leaders to be able to vision what this looks like. We do a training on instructional rounds, if that collaboration piece and getting those school-wide systems and protocols for getting teachers in to talk to each other and open those doors can push you to the next level. We can support that work. And then almost anything under the sun within your work. You don't have to find, just ask the question. This is what I think we need. How can we be supported? So we did some questions. Just a reminder of the digital handout is there for you. And Mindy put into the chat for us a 20% off discount code to this wonderful UDL playbook for districts and leaders. So all those, I know there were some aspiring leaders out there, a great place to start. It is a companion book for the book UDL Now to help to think about how to lead this through school and district leadership. It's available on publishing.cas.org. That 20% off code is spring23. So please check that out. You have until April 22nd to get that discount code. All right. And if you want to stay in touch, sign up for the CAST newsletter. You can sign up at bit.ly/cast-newsletter. That's where you'll see all the upcoming things that are happening, events that are happening at CAST, our research, the work that we're doing in workforce development. If we have some people that are joining from that area, the process stays the same, just different players in the process. But please reach out and we want to stay in touch with you via that newsletter. Thank you so much. We also value your feedback. So how did we do today? We are down to the minute. Please share your feedback in our implementation survey. We'll put that link in the chat for you. Let us know what you need next, what you want to hear about next. This was hopefully just the start of the conversation, and we can have an ongoing series where we can just think about how to support your voice in the field. Thank you so much.
And our contact info, right, is Niel on the handout too. If you ever need to just drop a question, we're here to help. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. This was great.
Have a great rest of the year. Still time to get some work done and take some of these steps. Or if you're visioning for next year, hopefully you can go in with a good plan.
Thank you all. Feel free to reach out to us.